In the winter of 1865, Isabela Flores, just 19, stood on the brink of despair in the unforgiving Colorado Territory. The chilling wind sliced through the thin fabric of her dress, pulling tight across her shivering body and settling in her bones. Before her loomed her father, Tomás Flores, a man whose very presence felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. He was not just her father now. He was the architect of her despair, calculating her worth not in love or compassion, but in silver and livestock. She felt tears welling up, her heart racing with fear and shame as she faced the consequences of a fleeting romance that had led her to this moment. As he stared at her, his voice roared like thunder, booming with authority that sent tremors through her already fragile spirit. "You are nothing but a burden," he sneered, his words sharp as ice. Each syllable pierced through her heart, leaving deep wounds that ached to be acknowledged. The clinking sound of coins in his palm was a cruel melody that echoed in her ears, underscoring the transactional nature of her fate. She was marked not merely by the life growing within her, a child yet to be born, but by the scorn of a father who saw her as nothing more than a commodity to be exchanged. "Enough of this," he barked abruptly, cutting through her thoughts. With an impatient wave of his hand, he gestured toward a figure standing ominously a few paces away. A stranger, Santiago Ruiz, the mountain man who had come to take her away. "Take her," Tomás announced, devoid of any sign of paternal affection. "A bag of silver and a cow and she's yours." The nonchalance of his declaration stung sharply, reducing the depth of their relationship to mere numbers, as if Isabela were no more than livestock herself, an item for trade, stripped of her humanity. Isabela stumbled forward, her world tilting beneath her as she felt all hope slip from her grasp. The home she had known faded behind her, swallowed whole by the wide, unforgiving mountains that loomed in the distance. An ocean of despair threatened to drown her spirit, pain swelling in her heart, pushing against her insides like a restless tide. The icy grip of betrayal clenched tighter, squeezing breath from her lungs. As she stepped into an uncertain future, uncertainty piled upon confusion settled heavily upon her shoulders. "Hello, my dear friend," a quick voice broke through her internal storm, friendly and warm against her chilling reality. "This is Jasper Ashwood, your narrator of Mountain Tales. Before we start, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from. A big hug to you all, and I hope you enjoy the story." The inviting tone momentarily cast a glow of warmth through her fog of sorrow, offering a brief respite from the devastation she felt. Trapped in her father's swindling grip, Isabela would now leave behind the remnants of her previous life, her heart a tumultuous whirlwind of anger and shame. The rugged wilderness enveloped her, yet she felt like an unwelcome intruder in its embrace, trembling at the thought of what lay ahead. Santiago, a man weathered by his own adversities, stared at her with a penetrating gaze, sensing the weight of her burden reflected back at him. The world around them was a blend of the beautiful and the brutal, and she felt the sharp pang of fear clashing against curiosity about the man who would now become her custodian. Who was this man? Did he truly mean her no harm? The questions flooded her mind, yet the silence between them held potential. Santiago did not threaten her with harsh words or cruel actions, but rather stood as a tall, silent figure, observing her with a mix of wariness and understanding. In his eyes, she saw reflections of sorrow, and for a moment, her resolve wavered. A flicker of warmth and hope struggled to shine through her well-fortified walls of angst. Days stretched into relentless weeks, the weight of her arrival punctuated by an air of lingering apprehension. The tension simmered underneath the surface, a potent cocktail of anxiety and cautious hope. Santiago was a striking contrast to the toxic reality she had known. His patience in teaching her survival skills chipped away at the barriers she had erected around her heart. Each lesson offered not just as guidance, but as an invitation to trust. Amid the crackling of the fire and the wood's whispers, shared meals stirred between them, like a burgeoning relationship, moments stitched together by laughter and mirth. In those quiet hours, camaraderie developed organically, roots of trust sprouting through shared stories and mutual grief, entwining their separate lives. For each task they undertook, gathering firewood, mending clothes, cooking meals, there emerged an unspoken bond, each interaction a brick laid upon the foundation of their growing connection. Isabela began to see Santiago not just as an obligation, but as a lifeline thrown into the tumultuous sea of her existence. The weight of her father's rejection began to lift slowly, inch by inch, reframing her reality in unexpected ways. She found herself laughing, a sound that had once felt foreign, bubbling forth freely as she navigated this new life. Santiago's steadfast nature and quiet strength began to resonate within her, urging her to shed the skin of shame cloaked around her heart. The seasons turned outside their window as they embraced the warmth of their companionship, unwittingly learning the rhythms of each other's hearts. The icy veneer of doubt that once dominated Isabela's mind began to thaw, revealing a burgeoning sense of self and strength she had long forgotten existed. With every passing day, the dark shadows of despair that haunted her began to fade, lifting the weight that lay on her shoulders as the sun rose. But just as the light shone brighter in her life, darkness lurked ominously on the horizon. One fateful evening, the ground shook with the sound of hooves, a thunderous rumble growing nearer, sending shockwaves through Isabella's heart. The oppressive air felt charged with tension as her worst fear neared. Tomás had returned, an embodiment of wrath and desperation, riding hell-bent on reclaiming what he felt was rightfully his. "You'll not keep my daughter!" he roared with a ferocity that shook her to her core. "She's worth more than you'll ever know." The fury in his booming voice hacked through the fragile fabric of courage knitted between her and Santiago. In that moment, the air thickened with trepidation, and Isabella's heart raced in response. Yet, as she turned to look at Santiago, she found in him a well of resolve. Here was a man who truly saw her, not as a commodity, but as a woman deserving of love and respect. Drawing a breath that stirred her resolve, she stepped forward, her heart transforming from a prey to predator. She would reclaim not just her narrative but her strength. Together they would claim the ground upon which they stood, facing down her father's misguided cruelty. With every ounce of courage, Isabela declared, "I choose my own path." It was no longer about the bitter past. It was about a future she would carve with her own hands. The tension crackled in the air as Santiago stood beside her, silent yet powerful, their bond solidifying in that minute. They faced the storm ahead, together. Santiago Ruiz surveyed the distance where Tomás had ridden away, the dust settling behind him as the oppressive silence began to creep back in. The looming shadows of the mountains seemed to stretch even thicker with uncertainty, a cloud of tension replacing the earlier moment of shared bravery. Together they had addressed the unraveling danger, yet Santiago felt a shiver of unease prickle down his spine. Could he protect Isabela from the storm that was sure to follow? Turning to her, he saw the fire still burning brightly in her eyes. "We need to prepare," he said firmly, gripping her shoulders. "Tomás won't just let this go. He'll come back, and he'll come back hard." Isabela nodded, her expression reflecting a resolve that coursed through her veins, igniting her spirit anew. "It is time we establish our own terms. I won't be his pawn any longer." As they retreated from the confrontation site, the quiet of the woods enveloped them, their surroundings remaining one of stark contrast to the chaos that loomed. They moved through the dense trees, branches scratching against the fabric of their clothing, the crisp air filling their lungs, each breath fueling determination. Santiago motioned for Isabela to take a seat on a log outside their cabin, a place that had begun to feel like home, despite the unfamiliarity that had initially overshadowed their union. "We'll need allies," he said, casting a glance at the fire pit where embers danced in the twilight. "People who can stand beside us, who know the truth of your strength." She looked thoughtful, her brow furrowed slightly as she plucked at the hem of her dress, the mundane action landing heavily in light of the enormous commitment ahead. "Where will we find these people?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of uncertainty for the first time since they had confronted her father. "There are communities around here," Santiago replied, leaning back, his expression pensive. "Other settlers, traders who come through. We can go to the trading post in Duffy Springs. It's a hub of information, and those who live on the edge of these wilds understand the struggles we face." "I want to go," Isabela stated, the earnestness in her voice igniting a flicker of warmth within him. "I want them to see me for who I am, not just as a daughter or a woman in need. I want them to know my story." Santiago's heart warmed at her fierce determination, painting a picture of bravery that made him want to fight the world for her. "Then, that is what we will do. We will take your story to them." The next day, with the sun cresting the horizon and casting a golden hue across the rugged terrain, they began the trek towards Duffy Springs. Together, they gathered what supplies they might need, a hunting rifle and bullets for Santiago, food provisions, and Isabella's skills in cooking and healing to aid their cause. Each step forward brought them further away from a past filled with fear and closer to a potential future they would carve together. The town of Duffy Springs was alive with activity when they arrived, vibrant and chaotic, a stark contrast to the stillness of the mountains they called home. The clang of metal welding together with the loud conversations of merchants filled the air, singing a song of industry and survival. Isabela looked around wide-eyed, absorbing the noise and sights of her newfound clarity. "Let's start at the tavern," Santiago suggested, as they strolled hand in hand through the bustling streets. The building, a weathered timber frame with a kindly sign swaying in the gentle breeze, radiated warmth, laughter, and camaraderie. "That's where we'll find the locals." A sense of trepidation filled Isabela as they entered. She was acutely aware of every gaze darting toward her. She suddenly felt like a flickering flame on the brink of snuffing out. Santiago's grip on her hand tightened reassuringly as they stepped into the tavern's inviting glow. Inside it was dark and warm, the scent of baked bread and roasting meat mixing with the faint tang of ale. "Just be yourself," Santiago encouraged softly, leaning closer to her ear. He guided her to a corner table, a strategic position that allowed them both to watch the room. "We'll take it one step at a time." Taking a deep breath, Isabela glanced around the room, and of the many faces, one in particular caught her eye. A man sat alone at the bar nursing a drink, his eyes glimmering with curiosity. He seemed rugged, weathered by experience, yet softened by the kindness that resided within. He glanced at them again, and Isabela felt her pulse quickening. As Santiago began to speak to the bartender, she leaned closer to hear. "We're looking for any allies we can find. The woman you see beside me has faced immense injustice, and we aim to rally support against it." The man at the bar approached, his movements steady and purposeful. "What kind of injustice?" he asked, his voice deep and unyielding. He stood tall, exuding an authority that contradicted the laid-back ambience of the tavern. Isabela's heart pounded, unsure if she was prepared to share her truth. The world of pain and betrayal her father had by hand forced upon her felt raw, an open wound that had yet to heal. But Santiago stood beside her, an unwavering pillar of strength. She took a breath and began to speak. "I am Isabela Flores, daughter of Tomás Flores. I've come to reclaim my life." At the mention of her father's name, a murmuring spread throughout the tavern. Faces turned, whispers threaded through the air, a tight web of curiosity knitting them together. "He uses his influence to keep control over those he considers his property." Santiago jumped in, taking a stand beside her, solid and unwavering. "Isabela is no such thing. How dare you speak against him?" A voice from the back called out, an older man piping up, eyes filled with disdain. "He carries weight in these parts. Many rely on him." "Weight doesn't define right," Santiago countered firmly. "It's not just about one man. It's about the rights and freedoms of the people who have been silenced and oppressed." A ripple of tension coiled through the room, but grounded itself as Isabela felt the power of Santiago's every word. There were others like her, those who had been torn down and looked to rebuild. She cleared her throat and spoke gently but firmly. "It is time for new voices to rise. I refuse to live in fear." The man from before, now leaning against the bar, began to nod. "Your father may have power, but it's time to share truth," he said, his voice echoing the despair of many. "But bravery requires more than just words. It requires action." Santiago glanced at Isabela, their eyes meeting in understanding. "We seek not only support but a commitment to protect and rise," she added. "Together we can reshape the narrative that binds us." Around the tavern, murmurs morphed into nods of agreement among some, while others remained skeptical. Santiago continued to rally, appeals for a community built on fairness pouring from him. The once intimidating room now felt electric, and Isabela sensed that something monumental was building, a movement woven from threads of courage. "We ought to have a gathering, a chance to talk to everyone," the rugged man proposed, "a place where we can hash this out without fear. Follow me. We have a lot to discuss." As Isabela and Santiago accompanied the man toward a back chamber, anticipation coursed through the air like a herald of the unknown. In their hearts, both felt a sense of obligation to face the storm ahead together. The gathering room they stepped into was quieter, the atmosphere thick with purpose. People filed in, drawn by the whispers of Isabela's story, curious to learn of her mission. Standing at the front, Santiago held Isabela's hand firmly. "We've all suffered enough," he began, his voice resonating powerfully. It is time for those who have felt Tomás's power to unite. Isabela could sense the energy shifting, the tight knots of her anxiety slowly unraveling as hundreds gathered. They were there standing for justice, to shed light none had before. The tension dissipated as people began to share stories one after another, from women struggling under patriarchal oppression to hard-working men who felt threatened by the looming shadow of Tomás. Through sharing and community connection, walls began to break. As individuals spoke, each tale added grain upon grain to a burgeoning relationship forged between Isabela and her newfound community. As she listened, she also began to interject, sharing how a woman's worth was reflected in her courage, respect, and independence. She could feel a pulse of unity growing within the chamber, a revolution in the making. Hours flew by, and the gathering forged itself into more than just words, transforming into an alliance solidified by pledges to stand beside one another against the dark threat looming ahead. The urgency for justice thumped steadily beneath their shared resolve, burgeoning within each heart, beating in sync with purpose. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Isabela and Santiago exchanged glances of triumph amidst the fatigue that infiltrated their bones. "We made a difference," Santiago said, refreshing hope igniting anew. "Yes," she replied, taking a self-satisfied breath. "We've created allies." They embraced, feeling the warmth of trust settle between them like a protective cloak. It was a moment of bonding, of commitment to protect the light amid the encroaching darkness. Before the room could settle to disperse, the rugged man spoke again. "We must formulate a plan, strike before Tomás comes charging back." There was a murmur of agreement, and Isabela couldn't help but feel a swell of anticipation. "Let us meet again at sunrise." The momentum carried within their newfound family fused them together, fire ignite within each of them, offering warmth and hope in the depths of lingering fear. They all breathed a sigh of relief, rejuvenated by action and purpose. With Santiago's hands clasped tightly in hers, Isabela stood tethered to this newfound life, whispers of a brighter future dancing in her heart. Together, they would face whatever challenges arose, defy the odds, and transform their destinies once bound by oppression into threads of newfound freedom. As dawn broke over Duffy Springs, the light crept gently through the dusty windows, illuminating the faces gathered in the tavern once again. Isabela awoke early, her heart racing with both excitement and apprehension. The air felt charged, as though the world itself was waking up to the possibilities of what lay ahead. Today would mark the beginning of action, and with each heartbeat her anticipation grew stronger. "Ready?" Santiago asked, his voice low and steady, breaking her from her reverie as he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a reassuring figure amidst uncertainty. "More than ready," Isabela replied, straightening her shoulders while checking her reflection in the cracked mirror above the fireplace. She brushed a stray hair behind her ear, determination radiating through her features. "This is our chance to make a real difference." As they walked to the tavern, Isabela could feel the weight of those who had come before her resting heavily on her shoulders. The women who had fought against oppression, the men who had stood their ground against tyranny, and now her friends, who had united to protect their fragile sense of freedom. The tavern was alive with the hum of voices as the community members began to gather for the meeting. Overstuffed tables were already filling with people, their faces reflecting a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Isabela inhaled deeply, drawing strength from the camaraderie that had blossomed overnight. She stepped inside, aware that this was more than a mere meeting. It was a stand against injustice. Santiago made his way to the front, a natural leader emanating calmness. He looked at Isabela, a flicker of pride flashing in his eyes, and she felt the warmth of his support envelop her. "Today we stand together," he declared, raising his voice to cut through the din. "Today we fight for our rights, our lives, and each other." The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing against the wooden walls, inspiriting their spirits. Isabela took her place beside him, filled with a resolute strength that radiated outward like ripples on water. "What we face is great, but our struggles have united us in ways that cannot be severed," she began, her voice warm yet powerful. "I stand before you not as Tomás Flores' daughter, but as Isabela Flores, a woman who chooses her own destiny." Another wave of applause filled the air. The energy was contagious, fueling the fire ignited within her core. She could feel the once distant goal of freedom drawing closer, the possibility of forming a community fueled by hope and empowerment. "We must devise a strategy," Santiago interjected, drawing everyone's attention back. "Tomás will try to intimidate us, but we will take charge of our narrative, and we will prepare for his inevitable return." A murmur spread through the group, tension palpable as fear lurked beneath the surface. But Isabela looked into the eyes of those around her, seeing more than just travelers and settlers. They were warriors, custodians of their fate, and as she connected with them, the fear began to dissipate, replaced with resolve. "Isabela and I have gathered information from the surrounding area," Santiago continued. "We know his strengths, and we know his weaknesses. His pride has borne him ill, and his delusions of grandeur will be his downfall. If we act and do not allow him to dictate our actions, we can face him together." Another man, taller than both Isabela and Santiago, stepped forward. "What support do we have of the women in this community? Can they come together? If we stand united, he will think twice before making a move." An elder woman in the corner chimed in, her voice steady. "Many of us have suffered under his whims, and I would rally my sisters to protect Isabela and the future of our children." Her eyes gleamed with fierce passion. "Our community can be our strength." Isabela's heart soared at the eagerness, and she stepped forward to rally the group. "Together we'll build a network, and with that connection we can act as a clandestine force, filling in the gaps he overlooks," she suggested. Another voice chimed in, a younger woman whose face was marred by what appeared to be the wince of past traumas. "We can use the meadows for training. I know we can teach basic defense tactics. Out here, every woman and man can learn how to stand their ground." "An excellent idea," Santiago agreed, clearly impressed. "Training in the meadows allows us to practice without drawing attention. We'll build our skills, fortify our bonds, and teach one another to defend against the threats that Tomás poses." As the energy in the room swelled, plans began to unravel, laying their groundwork with fervor. They formed groups based on skills, medical knowledge, hand-to-hand combat, hunting, and gathering information. Isabela felt an exhilarating thrill. Her heart surged as each individual offered their unique strengths to an ever-expanding tapestry of resistance. Within those walls, they were firmly grafted together, bound by shared purpose. The day drifted into the afternoon, their energy merging with laughter, stories of loss and strength bubbling to the surface. A lightness hung in the air amidst the intensity of their newfound mission, a refreshing juxtaposition. "Now let's not forget to incorporate leisure," a jocular man interjected. "A bit of a feast will fortify our spirits. We've got enough hands in this room to rally around the fire tonight. Let's share our stories while sharing good food." Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the remaining veils of angst. That spirit of community, camaraderie, and compassion defined their gathering. To build resilience, they would weave together threads of celebration amidst the impending struggle that loomed ahead. Isabela turned to Santiago, a radiant smile lighting her features. She could sense the simmering strength of this community, knew they were capable of achieving greatness by standing laboriously together against the tides of oppression. As evening fell, the tavern transformed into a warm refuge. The fireplace crackled, sending shadows dancing upon the walls as villagers gathered, forming a circle that held their laughter and stories like a fragile promise. Isabela felt exhilarated as she watched the bonds that tied these individuals together grow strong. She, alongside Santiago, took to the center, sharing the story of their journey. "We each carry a weight," Isabela said, her voice unwavering amidst the gathering warmth. "We carry scars that remind us of our past, yet we refuse to bow in submission. Instead, we'll use these stories to empower those who've walked similar paths." The air buzzed lightly from cheers, clinking tankards continuing to join the jubilant chorus. The warm-hearted banter filled a void that had long echoed silence, an empty landscape of fear now bustling alive with purpose and resilience. As night cloaked the sky, thick with the stars illuminating the universe beyond, Isabela felt a surge of hope engulf her. She glanced at Santiago, their eyes locking in understanding. In that moment, she knew they would face the storm together. "Together, we will rise as one," Santiago declared, lifting his tankard high. "As allies, as a united community, we'll protect what's ours, challenge the darkness, and carve our legacy into the annals of this land." "Together!" came the chorus echoing against the tavern walls, an anthem of solidarity that bore witness to their resolve as a family forged from trials. The night wound down, laughter still tracing its way through the tavern. As stars twinkled brightly overhead, Isabela felt more alive than ever before. excitement tinged with the uncertainty of tomorrow. Together, they prepared to rise against the tide, standing strong amidst the tempest that lay ahead. With renewed conviction and a sense of unwavering purpose, Isabela and Santiago took their positions at the helm of a gathering storm, forging connections that would anchor their resolve to face the oppressive forces of her past and usher in a brighter future. As dawn broke over Duffy Springs, the soft glow of the sun spilled across the town, wrapping everything in a golden embrace. Birds sang, their melodies weaving together the vibrant sounds of morning life, a stark contrast to the shadows that had once loomed over the community. Isabela stirred awake with anticipation coursing through her veins. Today was the day they had all been waiting for, the festival dedicated to sharing their stories, their truths, amidst a gathering chorus of resilience. With a satisfying stretch, she swung her legs over the side of her bed, the wooden floor cool against her feet. She dressed quickly, every movement infused with purpose. Each stitch of her clothing reminded her of the strength she had built over the many battles with Tomás, those battles that had turned her scars into symbols of survival. Stepping outside, Isabela was greeted by the aroma of breakfast drifting from the tavern. She could already hear laughter bubbling like a soft brook, filling the crisp morning air with life. As she walked down the familiar dirt road, she found herself reflecting on how different everything felt now. There was no longer the oppressive silence that had once made Duffy Springs feel like a desolate wasteland. Now, hope flickered everywhere, and she wanted to nurture it like a flame in the wind. "Isabela," called Santiago as he emerged from the tavern, his smile bright enough to rival the sun. "The villagers are buzzing already. You wouldn't believe how excited everyone is." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Isabela couldn't help but smile back. "Let's make sure that excitement translates into something magical," she replied, falling into step beside him as they moved toward the gathering. As they approached the tavern, the sight was heartwarming. Villagers were bustling about, setting up makeshift tables draped with colorful cloth, arranging benches under the large oak tree that stood sentinel over the square. The tree, with its sprawling branches, promised shade and comfort for those who would soon gather to hear the stories that had bound them. "Give it life, give it color," Clara exclaimed, dancing between the flower arrangements, her laughter contagious. With the energy of a whirlwind, she was weaving wildflowers into wreaths, a tapestry of color and fragrance that would adorn the festival grounds. Each flower represents a story. "Let's gather as many as we can." Isabela marveled at Clara's gusto. "And each one will bring an element of our journey to life," she said, joining Clara in collecting blossoms as laughter erupted around them. Soon villagers arrived with pots of steaming food, traditional dishes passed down through generations, reminders of cultural roots that laid the foundation of their identity. Isabela was beyond thrilled. This festival was more than a celebration. It was a sanctuary for their stories. It would stand as a testament to their journey from fear into freedom. In the midst of the cheerful chaos, Santiago climbed onto the small stage set up beneath the oak tree, drawing attention. "Listen up, everyone," he called, his voice rich with authority and celebration. "Today we come together not just to share our joys, but also our pain. Each story told today is a thread that weaves us together into a tapestry of resilience and strength." A wave of applause rippled through the crowd, and Isabela felt an electric thrill at Santiago's words. This gathering would honor what they had endured and reclaim what was rightfully theirs: identity, dignity, belonging. The morning slipped into the afternoon, with laughter and joyous shouts filling the air. Children darted between adults like little fireflies, their squeals of delight sparking yet more joy among the villagers. Isabela made her way around, engaging in conversation, encouraging everyone to share their own truths when their time came. With each interaction, she felt herself growing closer to her neighbors. Each connection forged in shared vulnerability was solidifying their community. Then came the moment when the first storyteller, Yara, stepped into the spotlight. A hush fell upon the crowd as she took a deep breath, grounding herself before launching into her tale. "I am Yara Cruz," she began, the strength in her voice evident. "My life has been woven with joy and sorrow, love and loss. I stand before each of you as a survivor. I lost my brother to the cruelty of Tomás, but I am here to reclaim his story." She recounted the bittersweet memories of her brother and the pain that he had endured. Yet it was her journey of healing, the resilience she had found through community, that became the focal point of her tale. As her story unfolded, It resonated powerfully. Isabela and the others hung on every word, feeling Yara's pain and triumph rippling through the audience. When she finished, an overwhelming wave of applause broke out, loud and genuine. Yara, moved, wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled, fiercely proud for having shared her truth. One after another, villagers stepped up to the stage. Each story was unique, imbued with personal struggles and intertwined with themes of hardship and healing. The festival transformed into a symphony, a harmony of laughter, tears, and strength echoing across the field. The air vibrated with the energy of connection as people embraced vulnerability, transforming their past into lessons of empowerment. Finally, it was Isabela's turn. With a flutter of nerves and anticipation, she stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding fiercely within her chest. She took a measured breath, looking out at the sea of familiar faces, supportive smiles cheering her on. "I stand here today, not just as Isabela Flores," she began, steadying her voice, "but as a woman who has known deep darkness and has found the courage to step into the light. I bear the scars from the weight of oppression, but I stand before each of you not as a victim, but as a warrior." Her story began to flow, dancing between the bitter memories of Tomás's reign and the sweet warmth of the friendships she'd forged. She shared the pain of lost years, the fear that once engulfed her, and ultimately the joy of discovery she found within the community that had slowly begun to see her as valuable. "I had to learn that my worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion of me," she declared. "Duffy Springs is my home, and with all of you I have drawn strength I didn't know I had. Together we stand, not just for ourselves, but for every life that has been touched by cruelty and injustice." As she concluded, applause erupted like a thunderclap and she stepped back, her heart soaring with the affirmation of support. They were not just stories, they were testimonies, moments of truth that elevated their collective power. The festival continued into the evening, a vibrant celebration of resilience and unity dancing under the stars. Lanterns hung from branches illuminated their gathering, casting a warm glow around the faces of a community reborn from the ashes of despair. Santiago joined Isabela by the fire once the storytelling wrapped up, the crackle of flames adding an enchanting backdrop to their mutual pride. "You were magnificent," he said, eyes shining with admiration. "You've turned every bit of pain into power." "Thank you," Isabela replied, shaken by the depth of emotion coursing through her. "Today has shown me how far we've come and how much stronger we can be together." With the fire casting flickers of light on their faces, Isabela and the villagers sang songs of their heritage, voices rising in the crisp night air, a sweet balm against the wounds of their pasts. It was a night of connection. Masks had fallen, and they stood real in their authenticity. Yet amidst the joy, a whisper of caution stirred at the back of Isabela's mind. Tomás wouldn't stand idly by. The storm would soon gather. She exchanged glances with Santiago, the unspoken understanding lingering between them, a reminder that their fight was far from over. But for tonight, they would celebrate. They would engrave this night into their memories, a fierce reminder that they had chosen to unite through their stories, that they would face whatever came together, emboldened by their truths. The chorus of voices rang out into the night, not just a celebration of their histories, but a triumphant declaration that they were more than survivors. They were a community armed with the knowledge that their legacy would rise far beyond the landscape of dread, a testament ushering in a new era. Morning light spilled into Duffy Springs the next day, illuminating the remnants of last night's celebration, falling leaves and scattered petals from the wildflowers that Clara had woven into vibrant bouquets. Isabela stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the crisp, fresh air. Yet even in this moment of calm, a storm brewed within her heart. The thrill of the festival had faded, replaced by an unsettling tension that gripped the community. As she made her way down the familiar dirt path, the joyous laughter she had heard just hours earlier transformed into hushed conversations filled with uncertainty. Rumors spread like wildfire. Isabela could feel the unease emanating from the villagers, the hope from last night's gathering overshadowed by a dark cloud of anticipation. It was clear Tomás had not been idle, and his shadow loomed larger than ever. Santiago joined her at the crossroads. His face was solemn, and her heart sank at the sense of impending confrontation hanging over them like a fog. "We need to prepare for whatever he intends to do," he said, the weight of each word heavy with urgency. "He won't just sit back after our show of unity." Isabela nodded, determination hardening within her. We won't let fear dictate our actions. It's time we remind ourselves of the strength we've built together. We need to pull the community into action. They gathered the villagers in the tavern later that day, the room filled with an air of apprehension. Each familiar face bore a shadow, a reflection of their shared anxiety. As they settled into chairs provided by the versatile hands of Clara and others, Isabela stood up, rising to ease the tension. "Friends and neighbors," her voice rose above the murmurs, steady and clear. "What we've accomplished is just the dawn of a new beginning. Yes, Tomás poses a threat, but we have proven we can face adversity. Just last night we celebrated our stories, our truths. Those bonds make us formidable." The villagers shifted uneasily, but a glimmer of hope sparked within the crowd. Santiago stepped forward, standing beside Isabela. "We are not just stories. We are a tapestry of resilience. Together, we have the power to stand up against anyone who tries to tear us apart." Emboldened by their words, Isabela could see spirits begin to lift. "We need to devise a plan," she proposed. "If Tomás comes for us, we must be prepared to protect what is rightfully ours. We cannot allow the past to dictate our future." Questions rippled through the crowd. What should we do? How can we defend ourselves? Concerns swirled like leaves in the wind. Isabela paused, commanding their attention again. "We can utilize the resources we have. Our neighbors can serve as allies, those who have felt Tomás's cruelty in their own lives. We should reach out to them, strengthen numbers. Gather everyone who will stand with us," Santiago added. "We can fortify our defenses and strategize how to confront him if he threatens our home again." The crowd hummed with energy as the villagers began exchanging ideas, strategies unfolding like petals of a blossoming flower. Clara stood up, her eyes sparkling. "We should send messengers to the surrounding towns. If they know of our plight, perhaps they will join our cause. Tomás must understand that he is no longer just up against us as individuals. He faces an alliance." Plans took shape before Isabela's eyes as the villagers began organizing into groups, each tasked with a vital part of their defensive network. One group moved to prepare their homes, reinforcing doors and windows. Another began to gather supplies, collecting weapons where they could find them. The third group drafted letters to neighboring settlements, extending an invitation to join their stand against oppression. Isabela felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. "Let's meet back here by nightfall," she called, sealing their plan. "Together, we will unify our voices and prepare for whatever Tomás might bring. No more hiding. We will face him with the full might of our community." As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting a golden hue upon the village, Isabela and Santiago moved through the town, checking in on different groups as they worked diligently. Laughter began to filter back into the air as the energy of purpose filled the spaces once shrouded in uncertainty. However, a sense of foreboding still loomed in Isabela's mind. It wasn't just the physical threat posed by Tomás. The emotional scars left by his tyranny ran deeper than any weapon could reach. She needed to ensure that her community was not only armed, but also unified in spirit. As dusk fell, they returned for their evening meeting, each villager brimming with an energy that pulsed through the air with anticipation. They took their seats, and as their eyes fastened on Isabela and Santiago, something shifted, forging something new within their hearts, an undying collective spirit. Isabela opened the floor to stories, as she had done just days before. "We've faced our past together," she urged, looking into the eyes of familiar friends. "Let's reaffirm who we are and what we stand for. Share your stories, and let's keep the fire of hope alive." One by one, villagers stood to share their tribulations and triumphs. The weight of fear lifted as they spoke aloud the memories of strength they carried within themselves. Each tale transformed into verses of resilience that melded seamlessly into the chorus of their unity. As they shared, laughter intermingled with tears, the catharsis binding them, reinforcing their determination to stand together against Tomás. Clara recounted a story from her childhood when she initially learned to stand up against bullies. "It was in that moment I realized I could turn my fear into determination, and that's how I know we will rise against Tomás," she declared, a spark in her voice igniting embers of courage across the room. As the night wore on, the flames of the fire flickered brightly, casting dancing shadows across the villagers' faces, igniting determination in their veins and solidifying their purpose. By the time Santiago spoke, it felt as though they were not just a group organizing for a conflict. They had become a formidable family, prepared to protect one another. "When dawn breaks tomorrow, we will be ready," he announced, holding Isabella's hand tightly atop the table. Together we face whatever may come, emboldened by our truths. We will not let Tomás's shadow dim the light we have found. With their eyes shining defiantly, the villagers erupted into a unified cheer, a crescendo of voices rising, promising to stand as one against darkness. The energy in the room transformed. Fear became determination, and uncertainty was replaced by shared purpose. With renewed courage and a strong sense of solidarity, they drifted into the night, hearts and minds prepared to face whatever storm awaited them just beyond the horizon. As dawn broke over Duffy Springs, a golden light poured through the trees, illuminating the village that had become both a sanctuary and a battleground. Isabela stood on her porch, taking a deep breath, her heart pounding with both anticipation and apprehension as she prepared for the confrontation with Tomás. Today was not just another day. It was a decisive moment for her community, a turning point where they would either reclaim their power or be forced back into silence. Villagers began gathering in the tavern, their faces etched with a mix of determination and anxiety. The energy in the room buzzed like a live wire, and at the forefront stood Santiago, commanding respect and attention. "Today we hold the line," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "Today we stand together, united against the darkness that Tomás brings. We will show him we are more than just survivors. We are warriors for our home." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement as Clara stepped forward, clutching a banner that declared, "Together we rise." On her face was a fierce resolve that matched the pride swelling in Isabella's heart. She couldn't help but feel a surge of hope as she witnessed the unity among her friends. They had shared their stories, their pain, and now they stood together as one family ready to protect each other. Isabela felt the weight of responsibility resting on her shoulders, but she drew strength from the villagers around her. "Let us remember why we fight," she began, her voice rising with passion. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for our children and the future of our home. We've built something beautiful here, and we refuse to let it be destroyed by someone who believes he can control us through fear." The crowd responded with a powerful cheer, their voices intertwining in a chorus of unity and defiance. Isabella's heart raced with the fervor that filled the room. It felt as if they were channeling the spirits of every brave soul who had come before them, those who had fought for freedom and dignity. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. As they trudged forward toward the main road leading into town, the sun glared ominously in the sky. The air was thick with tension as villagers lined the path, anticipation electrifying the atmosphere. Isabela exchanged glances with Santiago, and they both knew there was no turning back now. They needed to face Tomás head-on, no matter what the consequences. The sound of galloping hooves tore through the silence, and Isabella's heart sank as the dark figure of Tomás appeared on the horizon. A sinister grin spread across his face as he approached with his gang of men, confidence oozing from every pore. "Look at what we have here," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Do you really think this little gathering of frightened mice will intimidate me?" Isabela stepped forward, determination burning in her chest. "We are not afraid of you, Tomás. We've faced our past and we stand ready to defend our future." Tomás chuckled, the sound echoing menacingly against the backdrop of the village. "Do you believe your little stories and brave words can protect you? I will enjoy tearing this facade apart." "Your threats don't frighten us," Clara shouted from the crowd, her voice fierce. "We are more than just victims. We are a community that stands together." Santiago moved up beside Isabela, his presence an anchor in the tempest of emotions swirling around them. "You've underestimated us, Tomás. Today is not the day for your tyranny. We will fight back." The tension in the air was palpable as the villagers stood firm, their spirits unyielding. Tomás's arrogance began to falter, and for a fleeting moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. Isabela seized the moment, adding, "We are a family. No one can break that bond, not you and not your threats." Her voice rang out above the murmurs of the crowd, a rallying cry that united them further. With a narrowed gaze, Tomás stepped closer, attempting to intimidate the villagers. "You're all playing with fire. I won't be threatened by the likes of you." But Isabela raised her chin, refusing to back down. "No, you're the one who's mistaken. We're not here to cower. Today we reclaim our dignity, our land and our spirit. We will protect each other no matter what it takes. There's nothing you can do to change that." As if conjured by her words, the sun broke through the clouds, pouring light onto the assembled villagers. They stood united, hearts pounding with the knowledge that the strength they had forged through shared stories and experiences had transformed them into something formidable. In that moment, the villagers erupted into a chant that resonated through the air, drowning out Tomás's bravado. "Together we rise, together we rise." Their voices melded into a chorus of courage and resilience, shattering the suffocating grip of fear that Tomás had tried to instill. As the day unfolded, Isabela realized they were not just facing a man, they were confronting the shadows that had loomed over their lives for far too long. Whatever the outcome, they stood greater than the sum of their parts. United by bonds of love, respect, and determination, today they were ready to fight for their freedom, to rewrite their story, and to uphold their legacy as the proud community of Duffy Springs.